Okay, in this video, we are going to start our new unit, Simplifying Expressions, with the vocabulary you're going to need. As you can see on this sheet that you should have in front of you, whether you printed it off, you recopied it onto paper, or you just opened it up in Google Docs to take notes on. I have filled out most of it for you. There's not a lot you have to add, but there are some things. So the first thing you want to know is, of course, what is an expression? An expression is something you've probably been dealing with since you first started math a very long time ago. So an expression is anything that does not have an equal sign, a greater than, or a less than sign. So here are some examples over here. 3 plus 4 minus 8. That's a problem, an order of operations problem you probably did back in elementary. X plus 12. Again, there's no equal sign, there's nothing here, so that's what makes it an expression versus an equation. Okay, now there are two types of expressions, as you can see here, a numeric expression and an algebraic expression. The word numeric sounds like the word number, and that's exactly what it is. A numeric expression means it only has numbers in it. You will not see variables. So this is an example of a numeric expression. There's only numbers. This, of course, is the type of expression you dealt with more in elementary, that order of operations problem, add, subtract, multiply, divide, an exponent, that sort of thing. Algebraic expression. Well, algebraic sounds like the word algebra. And a lot of times when we think of the word algebra, we think of variables. That's what most people think of when they think of algebra. And that's exactly what an algebraic expression is. It has at least one variable. Okay, it could have more. It could have multiple ones, but it has to have at least. Now, it can still have numbers. Some people think that it can't because that's numeric, but no, algebraic will have variables and numbers. So here's an example of algebraic x plus 12. We could have x plus y. That has all variables. They're both algebraic expressions. Now, all expressions are broken down into terms, okay? A term, the simplest way to tell you is it's anything between the addition signs, okay? So it's a grouping of a number and variable or a number by itself. That's also important. The actual definition of a term is a number by itself, or the product of a number and a variable, of a number and a variable. Okay, so for example, 3x is a term. That is a grouping of a number and a variable together. 3x does mean 3 times x, so that's why it's called a product. So in this expression, 3x is a term, 2y is a term, and then of course a number by itself. So 5 is a term. They are separated by your addition signs or subtraction signs if I had them. Okay, and that's one way to remember, but this is actually the official definition. But each one of these individually is a term. So this expression here has 3 terms. If I went back to this expression, x plus 12, it has 2 terms, just the x and just the 12. Okay, so a coefficient. A coefficient is the number being multiplied by a variable in a term. In other words, the number in front of the variable. It is never the number that stands alone. It is the number that is attached to a variable. So please remember that. So in the term 3x, the 3 is the coefficient because it's in front of the x. In the term 2y, the 2 is the coefficient. If I give you the term or the variable x, you may say there is no coefficient, but in fact, there is one, and it is the number 1. When you don't see a coefficient, it's the number 1. 1 times x equals x, so a lot of times we don't write that. So if you don't see a coefficient, it's 1. Or in this case, negative x. The coefficient, if I could slide a 1 in there, it works. So it's negative 1. So if you ever don't see 1, there is 1, and it's literally the number 1. So we talked about how a coefficient is a number in front of a variable and never the number that's by itself, because the number that's by itself has its own name. That is called a constant. So a constant is the number that stands alone. So in that expression we were dealing with before, 5 is the constant because it's by itself. It does not have a variable with it. So if I go back up here in this expression x plus 12, x, or 12, is the constant, and the coefficient on x is 1. And of course, a variable, you've heard me say this repeatedly, and most of us know what it is. A variable is a symbol or a letter that represents a number. And we in this class are going to use mainly letters. So in all these examples, our x and y's were variables. You will see many different letters. You have dealt with variables many times. Anytime in elementary you had the box plus 3 equals 5 and you had to fill in the box, that was a variable. That was more of a symbol. We're going to use more of the letters. And it does represent a number. So in this expression, 3 times x, x is a number. We just don't know what it is. Sometimes we solve for those numbers. Sometimes you'll be told specifically, I want you to plug the number 10 in for x. It just kind of depends on the problem. These two terms, like terms and distributive property, we will learn throughout the checklist and throughout the unit. So we're not going to talk about these right now, but we will come back to those as we continue throughout the unit. This is the basis that you need to understand for the vocabulary.